Welcome. Good afternoon, everybody, and warm afternoon to everyone who is attending for either the first time or a review. We really appreciate you all being here, and on behalf of End Credit Union and the Area Agency on Aging, we are very pleased to have you here. We are very excited to tell you that this year we have expanded to the full state of Colorado, offering our 7th year of retirement series. And we have offered both a fall and a spring session. My name is Pamela, and I represent the Area Agency on Aging. And we also have Jessica McMullen, who is behind scenes, and she is making sure that our webinar runs smoothly. So she will also be sending out the survey later for you to fill out. Most of you probably are familiar with the Area Agency on Aging, but just as a quick reminder, our purpose is to provide programs, education, and information that promote independence, well-being, and quality of life for older adults. We specialize in Medicare and retirement education through webinars, and we also publish our famous Yellow Book, which is the Senior Information and Assistance Directory. We've done that for, I think, at least 25 years. We also publish the Colorado Adult Medicaid Program and Veterans Benefits Guide, all of which are available at your local library or within our facility as well. We're proud to say that we also house the Senior Insurance Assistance Department for our state health insurance program, where we provide free education counseling with all things Medicare. If you'd be so kind as to make sure that you mute your phones, and if you would, put your questions in the chat or write them down on a piece of paper so you don't forget. We would like to save them until the end after the presentation, and Jane will be happy to review all of those with you. So what I'd like to do at this time is introduce our partner in the series, End Credit Union. And I'm going to introduce Bree Shalito, who is the Senior Manager of Community Impact, who's going to tell us a little bit about End and about the survey and the drawing that we're going to have. Go ahead.
Thank you so much, Pamela. Yes, as she said, my name is Bree Shalito. I'm from End Credit Union, Colorado's largest credit union. We have over 40 locations across the Front Range. So if anyone is interested in any services we provide, we're more than happy to answer any questions. Love to have you as a member. We also are very excited to partner this year again with the Pikes Peak Area Agency on Aging and offer this throughout Colorado, because we know from a community impact standpoint that we want to be sure that our community is getting this information and that they're feeling prepared to retire. So we've partnered with the experts here to be able to bring you that information. As Pamela said, we also have a giveaway. So if you do feel so kind to fill out the survey that you'll receive from Jessica after the session, and you'd like to put your name down, you'll be entered into that survey for a $50 Amazon gift card that we will send directly to your email. So if you fill out that survey, that's great. We've used those over the years many times to create new sessions, innovate current sessions, and we just really appreciate the feedback. So thank you so much for being here tonight and joining us in this series, and I'll give it back to you, Pamela.
Thank you, Bree. Now I would like to introduce our speaker for this evening, Jane Barton. She is a well-known author, national speaker, writer, and listener. She calls herself a listener. As the founder of Cardinal LLC, she addresses issues related to the challenges of aging, like change and transition, caregiving, and end of life. She does this through books, videos, podcasts, blogs, and educational programs. She presents innovative, transformational programs to community members and national audiences. And in this area in particular, she is known as a local aging expert. Please join me in welcoming Jane Barton.
Thank you, Pamela. I appreciate your warm welcome. I'm just going to share my screen with everyone. So greetings, one and all. And before we jump into our topic today, I just want to extend my heartfelt thanks to Pikes Peak Area Agency on Aging, Pamela specifically, because she's my go-to person. Also Jessica behind the scenes and all the staff from ENT. I'm very honored to be here tonight to share hopefully something that will prove to be beneficial to you and yours, and to participate in this very important retirement series. Earlier this year, I attended the other sessions by the other experts around retirement, and I know that there's just a wealth of information And so if you are returning, as a little refresher, we learn best by repeating and revisiting ideas. And if you're new to the retirement series, certainly welcome. And although we can't be together, know that I'm a very relational person. So I'm sending you a virtual hug through cyberspace. And just know that I honor your time and your commitment to learn a little bit more about this journey of retirement. Now, a little background, very little. Excuse me, if you have the handout associated with this program, you have my bio, and Pamela shared some things with you. But I'm an educational consultant, and I am I think by nature, a teacher because I'm a lifelong student, and the best way to learn is to teach. And so I'm very delighted to have my own consulting firm, Cardinal, and I have fabulous sponsors such as AARP Colorado that's sponsoring my efforts tonight that allow me to do what I love, and that is to speak, write, and listen about the topics I'm passionate about. That includes aging, end-of-life care, and caregiving. I have a background in hospice and palliative care, serving as a chaplain for a short period of time, but I spent most of my career as a community educator. Now, all of that began in 2004. And based on my apparent age, I'm sure you're wondering, well, what did she do before that, right? Because I'm not a trust fund baby and I'm not a kept woman. Darn the luck. But before that, I worked in finance for about 3 years, and I had a 16-year career in the oil patch. I worked as a geologist, and most of that time was in management. So go figure, right? A very curious career path. But today, what I do is rooted in my passion for the lived experience, understanding that life can be very scary when we don't have knowledge and information to make informed choices. When I was called to care for my mom, I was 15. She was diagnosed with a terminal illness. And I learned very quickly that knowledge is power. And so everything I do today, when I speak and I write, I hope to share at least one thing that will be a benefit to you and yours and the people perhaps that you serve. So you can make informed decisions instead of reacting out of fear, because that rarely serves us well. And so our topic this evening, we're going to talk about retire by design, create a life you love. And we're going to consider this whole premise of retirement from a variety of different perspectives. But first, we need to recognize that retirement, it is a process. It's an iterative process. And we may have started planning years ago, or maybe you're just starting today. But understand that when you dive into this, it requires knowledge and planning and a commitment to keep revisiting those plans. Because as things in your life change, you're going to have to tweak this plan for retirement. It's just kind of the nature of the beast. Also recognize that retirement is just one step in the aging process. So if we want to look at the big picture of retirement, our retirement plan is going to be informed by our aging process. They are inextricably linked. So we need to understand how we are aging and what factors inform and influence our aging process. So this evening, I invite you to consider these three main aspects of aging. First, we're going to look at the process, the biological process of aging, as well as the cognitive process, and how those factors dial in to your design for retirement. Then we'll look at your companions as you are getting older, the players, the people that are sharing this journey with you. What do you expect from them? What do you want from them? Do you even need them? And we will recognize that they are vitally important. And if we are to age well, to be well, and to retire well. And then finally, we'll look at the setting, the context in which we are aging and retiring, the geographic location, the residence in which you choose to reside, and all the implications associated with that particular setting. So we have a lot of ground to cover. And as Pamela noted, as questions bubble up, please put them in the chat box or write them down on a piece of paper. Because if you're like me, I think of a question and 5 minutes later, it has left the building. So make a note and we will address that when we have time to chat. So let's begin by talking about the process of aging, this journey. How do we plan for it? And how can that plan of aging dial into our design for retirement? Well, like any other journey that you might plan for, you need to know how long the journey is going to be. You plan differently for an overnight trip to the mountains as opposed to going to Europe or to Africa or South America, right? You're going to pack different things. You have a different time frame. So how long is the expected journey of aging? What are we actually planning for? Well, if you look at the most updated life expectancy graphs, you will see that women are expected to live a little bit over 80, men a little bit over 75. Now, the downturn in that graph, the trend that has been reversed, that is due to the global pandemic. We've lost a year and a half in life expectancy over the last couple of years because of the increased mortality throughout the globe. But still, this is a considerable length of time if you look back over the last century. If you lived in 1900, the life expectancy was 47 years of age. So 47 compared to almost 80 for both men and women, that's a very different mindset. It requires a very different approach. It requires a very different plan. And our particular expectation today, it affords us the opportunity to actually have a design around retirement. Whereas at 47, individuals didn't have that particular possibility. So when you're planning for this journey, just like any other journey, you're going to look to the future and you're going to think, what lies ahead? What are the opportunities? What are the possibilities? What are the challenges? What are the openings in this particular journey? Now, your expectations of what lie ahead, it's going to be informed and shaped and influenced by the predominant societal view of aging. And we're talking specific to the United States today. Now, if you watch any kind of TV, you read any material, or you're on the internet, you recognize that predominant societal view of aging in the United States today is one of denial. We are not going gently into that good night. We don't want to think about getting older. We don't want to talk about getting older. We certainly don't want to plan for getting older, because age-denying attitudes, we revere and honor youth almost at all cost. Hence the birth of the multi-billion-dollar anti-aging industry, the lotions and the potions and the surgical procedures and the supplements to keep aging at bay, as if we could, right? Now, I know I'm going to be the bearer of some bad news this evening, but right here and right now, we are all getting older at the nanosecond level. It is a biological process that I guess we could stop, but I don't particularly want to, because that would equate to death right now. But this anti-aging, age-denying attitude, it makes us afraid to look ahead. We are reluctant to do it. We procrastinate. And because of that, we fail to plan for our aging process, and we fail to plan for retirement oftentimes. The consequence is that we age and retire by default, not by design, which means oftentimes we become a victim of our circumstance. And that can be an absolute train wreck in some circumstances. Now, I realize that maintaining a balanced perspective of aging, it is very hard, because we feel like we're pushing a boulder uphill against the tide, because everyone around us, they're age denying, they're reluctant, they don't want to go there, they don't want to talk about it. And so we are somewhat countercultural if we say, no, I want to plan ahead. I want to consider what the possibilities are as I age and what factors I need to incorporate into my design for retirement. Now, this is where knowledge is power comes to bear. By understanding how we age, we can anticipate some of the likely changes ahead just because of the biological process that we can expect. Then we can be proactive. We can lean into this and we can plan ahead. Now, I know that we're not clairvoyant, that we can't control everything that's going to happen in the future, but we can certainly be much better prepared logistically, practically, and certainly emotionally around this. So let's consider looking into the future. What are we expecting as we get older? And how does that dial in and inform our retirement by design, when we know that we're going to have changes in health more than likely. Very few of us are going to live to the ripe old age of 80 or 90 and have no challenges physiologically. We know statistically, 80% of individuals over the age of 60 have one chronic condition. And those persons over the age of 60, 65 have two chronic conditions, 2/3 of that population. So we know that something's probably going to happen. So we need to anticipate that, consider the what ifs. So looking ahead, looking to the horizon, as we are aging, this is going to be a continuous process of change. Now that's going to be daunting and challenging in and of itself because most human beings don't like change. But there are going to be some expected physical changes along the way. Certainly know that this physical process is going to result in some outward manifestations that are disconcerting for most people. The gray hair, the wrinkles, what I call the ravages of gravity, everything moving to the south. And even though I was born in Texas, I really don't like this migration at this point in my lifetime. Now that's disconcerting, but of even greater importance are the changes internally, the systems that we count on to live, our cardiovascular system, our respiratory system, our liver, our kidney, all of those functioning parts that we need if we are to age well and to be well. Those are going to change over time, not because of a disease process, but because of the natural consequence of physical aging. Now, there is breaking news and there is good news for the boomer generation and younger. So things that we can kind of hang our hat on. Yes, we are living longer. We have a longer life expectancy. And in addition to that, we're actually living healthier lives and more active lives. Now, I know I've already noted that we're going to have to deal with some chronic conditions. That's kind of the flip side of longevity. But we're also experiencing what academicians are referring to as the compression of morbidity. We are pushing disability and disease later in life. So we have more years of better years. Now, this doesn't just happen. This is more than merely luck. We have to be invested in this process of aging in order to reap those dividends. Because whether we dance through life or whether we are sidelined by life is largely dependent on our chosen lifestyle. Now, this is good news. 70% of how we age directly correlates to our intentional choices, our lifestyle. And that's our eating habits, our sleeping habits, our exercise habits, also our social support system, whether we choose to drink or drug, all of those things will dial into how we age. Now, I love to be in control. I'm somewhat of a control freak, and maybe you relate to that. So this is fabulous news. 70% of how we age, we have some level of control over. 30% correlates to our genetic makeup. So, are you making good intentional choices? And if so, you're going to reap the benefits of that. But if not, it's never too late to make a good decision. So just keep in mind, lifestyle impacts how we age. And preventative care is an essential part of this plan. We know that in 1998, that's when a lot of the health insurance companies recognized, based on some published research, that it was cheaper to insure healthy people instead of those with an acute condition. So we started seeing many of these insurance providers saying, hey, no copays if you go in for your wellness exam every year. And so ever since that point in time, there's been this huge push on preventative care, because we learned that when disease invades our body, we have a chink in our armor. It's as if we put our foot on the accelerator of aging. It speeds up the process precipitously. So that's why we want to keep disease at bay almost at all costs for as long as possible, so we can have not only a longer quantity of life, but also a higher quality of life as well. So being proactive about our aging process physiologically, it pays life-giving dividends. It's certainly worth our time, attention, and our effort. Now let's consider how we age cognitively, the cognitive changes that we can expect. And we're not talking about a disease process. I'm not referring to a dementia at this point. I'm just talking about getting older. What can we anticipate? Well, the process or the brain slows down for a variety of reasons, oftentimes directly associated with changes in sensory perception, how we bring in information to be processed. So if we have difficulty seeing changes in our vision or difficulty hearing, it affects our cognitive abilities to process information as well. So I liken this to a difference in internet speed. So for example, when I was in my 20s, it was as if I was hooked up to high-speed internet. You asked me a question, boom, I had an answer for you. A calculation, don't need a calculator, I got the answer for you. So you have a question, I have an answer. Today at 64, you can ask me those same questions, and I still have the data in my database. It's not corrupted, but it's going to take me a little longer to flip through the filing cabinets, find the file, and get that piece of information, because now I'm hooked up to the old dial-up modem. And I hope some of you are my contemporaries and you actually understand what I just said. You know, you hit the button connect and you hear this strange sound on your computer that you're connecting. A few minutes later, you get this lovely message. You're now online. Now, I'm not making light of this because this can be very frustrating. In fact, it can be frightening for some people if they don't understand that this is a natural part of the aging process, because there is such a prevalent fear in our country today of dementia. So any little slip in memory, there's this huge fear that perhaps this is a precursor to a progressive form of dementia, such as Alzheimer's disease. Now, I'm not diminishing this fear, but this goes, again, knowledge is power. So realize a balanced perspective on this particular situation will serve us well. For individuals between the ages of 65 and 85, it's estimated that less than 10% will actually experience any form of dementia. Now, for those that do, I know this is a life-changing experience, but I don't want you to be so afraid of this potential or possibility that you're not willing to look to the future. So keep things in balance, understand the risk, but also continue to lean into the process so you can age well, be well, and retire well. Now, in regard to the aging process and changes cognitively, is there anything that we can do to be proactive? Well, I'm sure you've read a lot online about supplements, brain games, staying cognitively engaged. And there is some research that bears out that all of this, including watching your diet, can be truly beneficial. I think a commitment to being a lifelong student certainly serves us well. There's a lot of evidence and research today that if we challenge ourselves to learn new things, for example, if you've always been very much left brain, highly analytic, maybe switch over to a right brain activity and learn how to play a musical instrument. Maybe you learn a new language. So you challenge yourself to stretch the limits and kind of get out of your typical academic rut. Now, this is very, I think, exciting. It can be fascinating. It also tends to expand our cognitive reserve that will serve us well in the future. We've learned over the last 2 years, if we didn't know it before, that there are unlimited abilities to continue educating yourself online. And I've just listed a few for your consideration this evening. One of my favorite is Coursera.org if you're into online learning at the university level. And this is all free of charge if you have no desire for a certificate or a degree plan. You can enroll in classes from some of the greatest minds in the business on any topic that captures your imagination. From universities throughout the world, you can be part of group discussions, threaded conversations. I'm usually enrolled in at least one class at any point in time. I find it just extraordinarily fun and also life enriching. There are also lifelong learning opportunities, often designed for older adults. There's the Osher Lifelong Learning Institute, OLLI, and that's a national organization. Requires a membership that's very affordable, and you can take classes in your own community. There's the Academy in Denver, another lifelong learning platform for older adults. And if you want to go back on campus, state universities in all of our states offer a reduced or waived tuition. So you can get back in the classroom, you can have that intergenerational experience, and you can learn. Now, for other online classes, AARP has so many webinars right now. Senior Planet also is a national organization that has webinars on a myriad of topics. All you have to do is get out on the internet, subscribe to a few newsletters, and you will have yourself booked for more classes than you possibly can attend. So many opportunities out there. Another way to be proactive cognitively is to invest ourselves in other people by serving as a mentor to others. And interestingly enough, when we're sharing our wisdom, perhaps with a younger generation, they're sharing insights with us as well in return. So it turns out to be a lovely exchange of gifts. And it's not only cognitively beneficial, it also enhances our social network and our social support. So when it comes to our cognitive health as we age, stay curious, be fascinated by life, and stay connected. It will serve you well. Now, in this overall category of health and well-being, just keep this in mind. I saw this so often in hospice and palliative care when I worked in that realm, and I also witnessed it in my own family. A change in health, physically and or cognitively, it is a game changer. And after that diagnosis, oftentimes you are headed off in a direction you never imagined. It can totally change the trajectory of your life. So everything that we can do to maintain good health, physically and cognitively, again, I think it is worth our time and attention. And keeping in mind that we have control of our lifestyle, what we choose to do day in and day out, and that this is a key to how we age, that should be motivational. That should inspire us because, again, we're in control of that. And that will oftentimes shape the future that perhaps we will only endure or perhaps we will thoroughly enjoy, which is my hope. Now let's shift gears and let's talk about the people that we're sharing this journey with, what I call the players, our traveling companions, because they certainly are a part of this design process. Now, I know that aging is a very unique experience. It's very personal, but it's not private because we age in community, however you choose to define that community, family, neighborhood, metropolitan area. I don't know how you define it, faith community, but you're not doing this all by yourself. So when you're looking to the future and you're designing your aging process and your retirement plan, consider with whom will you hang? And do this intentionally because we know there are some people that we are around from time to time that are not life-giving. In fact, they're actually life-draining. And as I'm contemplating my retirement, those are not the people I'm writing into my script intentionally. I want to hang with people that are interesting, provocative, enjoyable, engaging, life-giving, fun. These are the people that I want to hang with. Another way to ask yourself this question is, who do you want to get older and weirder with? This is a phrase that my friends and I use when we contemplate our own aging process. And I think what really is the undercurrent for this question is that my friends and I, we all want to get older and weirder with people that we know and with people that know us. That shared history, that common bond, those roots, that foundation that we can continue to build upon. Also know that the players, the people that you're sharing this journey with, caregiving is an integral part of that process and the plan, because these are the people you know and you trust. So who will care for you and who will you be called to care for as well? Now, as you're thinking about these questions and the players in your particular retirement plan, I would imagine initially you think about your family, you think about your friends, because these are the people we lean on. These are our people that we trust. When I think about those folks, these are the people I know that when I pick up the phone at 3 a.m., if something happens and I say, hey, something happened, get over here. They'll show up on my front porch in their tattered robe, their fuzzy slippers with bed hair and 2 cups of coffee. And they'll say, okay, Jane, what's going on? Without question. I trust them. I know them. I can lean on them. Such a vitally important part of this planning process. Now, with that in mind, we still need to consider the what ifs. What if, as we are getting older, what if we were to outlive our support system? What if we were to end up being the last one standing? How would that change the plan for retirement, the plan for aging? And how would we respond to that scenario? Now, you may be like me. I am the last one standing in my family of origin. My parents and my brother predeceased me. And that has been an adjustment for me. It's a totally different perspective and a posture as I contemplate my own aging process. But even today, if you're sitting there thinking, well, you know, I have my kids and my grandkids, I'm married, I have some siblings, whatever it might be, that's true today, but there's no guarantee that you're still going to have that support system 5 years or 10 years from now, 20 years from now. Things can change unexpectedly. And then what will you do? How will you plan for that lived experience, aging alone? Now, this is not meant to frighten you. It's just meant to plant a seed that if you haven't thought about that before, you should, because aging alone presents some very different challenges. Doesn't mean you can't overcome them, but you need to incorporate that perhaps as a plan B in your retirement by design. Now, looking back in the 1950s, it was recognized that about 10% of the population over the age of 65 lived alone, and hence they were aging alone. And oftentimes that was due to some intentional choices, or maybe because they were the last one standing in their family. In 2020, that number has almost tripled. 28% of the population over 65 is living alone. And there is a phrase that refers to this population. Elder orphan was coined about 30 years ago. It's been updated recently because that was not a term that people gravitated toward. So solo ager is the preferred term today in the literature. But either term refers to a person aging alone with little support. Now, this could also be a situation where you actually have family members that are living, but geographically, they're not accessible to you. They're not there to care when you need them. So if you have children that live on the other side of the country, perhaps they live in a different country. If you have an emergency, they may be emotionally distraught about it. They want to be there to care for you, but they're not able to get there, at least not in a moment's notice. So keep in mind this term solo ager. Now, aging alone presents many challenges, and research bears out that there is a ripple effect to aging alone. Oftentimes it's reported there is a lesser quality of life and there is a shorter quantity of life, a shorter life expectancy, oftentimes correlating to different lifestyles, different choices that are made that have a direct impact on the physical health of that individual. Certainly caregiving complications, when there's no one there to care, what do? There can be a sense of isolation, aging alone, and it is harder to age in place, to age well in place. And certainly if you are aging alone, it can transform what is oftentimes perceived as life-giving and life-renewing solitude, it transforms that into a sense of isolation. Now, social isolation is a lack of interaction with other people and oftentimes due to situational factors. Now, we all know this, sadly, incredibly well due to the situation over the last year and a half because of COVID. We were mandated to separate, to isolate, to insulate initially, and that was difficult. And because of that imposed social isolation, there's been a tremendous amount of concern about the mental health of our overall population because of that separation. AARP did a study well before COVID. I think it was published a few years before COVID landed on our shores. They did a survey of their membership, and it was estimated then that 8 million people over the age of 50, they were affected by social isolation to a greater or a lesser extent. And oftentimes our subjective response to that isolation is feeling lonely. Now, loneliness is an experience that we will all have as human beings. I would imagine everybody listening today and present today, you felt lonely at some point in time for a variety of different reasons. But the real kicker here is chronic loneliness, when that loneliness persists and it just intensifies, and we start to pull away from perhaps people that we could interact with. But it becomes this self-fulfilling prophecy. And this is when loneliness affects our health and well-being. Again, before COVID became part of our day-to-day experience, there was a lot of information being published from researchers focused on this whole issue of chronic loneliness. And research determined that it is now considered a health risk factor equal in its significance to smoking, overdrinking, drugging, high blood pressure, high cholesterol, lethargy, and obesity. So there are some significant measurable implications for being insulated and isolated. And the reason for that is because it's counter to our inherent nature as human beings. As John Cacioppo noted in his book, Loneliness, published, I believe, in 2009 now, he noted that we are an inherently gregarious species. We need and want each other. We serve each other well by being in relationship. David Brooks commented on this in 2008 in one of his publications. He said, "We are intensely social creatures, deeply interconnected with one another. And the idea of the lone individual rationally and willfully steering his or her own life course is often an illusion that ultimately does not serve us well." So the bottom line is this: we are all in this together. And so your people, a community, a support system is a vitally important element in your retirement by design. Now, to bear witness to this, I want to share with you a quick story, a very poignant story that I read now almost 5 years ago. It was published on a blog that I read weekly called The Sunday Paper. It's published by Maria Shriver. If you're not familiar with it, I would highly recommend it. She has some, I think, very important insights to share. But on this one occasion, she was relating a story she'd actually seen on a local TV station in California where she lives. And it was the story of a 90-year-old woman who found the courage to reach out and ask for what she needed. She needed some friends. And evidently, this 90-year-old woman had been a caregiver for many, many years for her aging spouse. And upon his death, she recognized that she had become incredibly isolated, which happens oftentimes with family caregivers. And so as she was grieving the death of her husband, she had no one to support her. She had no one to talk to. And she looked around her neighborhood and she said, "I don't even know my neighbors anymore." So one morning, she took the step to go out and ask for help. And she put a sticky note on the front door of all of her neighbors' homes. And then she went home and she waited. On her note, she wrote this: "Would you consider to become my friend? I'm 90 years old, live alone. All my friends have passed away. I'm so lonesome and scared. Please, I pray for someone." Well, later that day, her prayers were answered. Across the street, one of her neighbors pulled into their driveway, a mother and a teenage daughter. And they saw this note flapping on their front door. So they went up and they read it. And at the bottom of the note was the woman's name, her phone number, and address. So they immediately walked across the street, knocked on her door, and a friendship took root. Now, in this story, Maria Shriver posted a picture from that interview that this news station had conducted. 3 generations of women, and they were all absolutely glowing. They were beaming because of this newfound connection and friendship. Now, I found that story just absolutely priceless. It's priceless. And it's such a wonderful reminder to me that I need to work to keep all the friends I can get, because it will shape and inform my lived experience. So today, if you don't feel well supported, if you're feeling isolated, if you're feeling lonely, don't be shy. We all need caring, committed, courageous companions in this journey if we are to age well and be well. So reach out, just like the 90-year-old woman. Be courageous enough, be vulnerable enough to ask people for their help and create that supportive network that will be an integral part of your design. Nurture lifelong friendships, make new friends of all ages. Intergenerational friendships are life-giving and life-enriching. And there is truth in the old adage, you can't have too many friends. Now we're going to slide into our last point of discussion this evening. We're going to talk about the setting of how we are aging and also retiring, the context in which we live. What do we need to consider? And what should we plan for as we are getting older, related to where we are getting older? Housing is a critical component of your retirement plan. Now, keep in mind, this is logistical, it's practical, it's certainly a financial consideration. It's also emotional, because when you start talking about where you reside, home is where the heart is. There is a connection to the place where we live. We create memories in that space. It's not just a structure. And if we've lived in that particular residence with family or maybe friends that we're sharing a home with, we have different connections to that space. So to contemplate leaving it, it's more than just a financial choice or a practical matter. If we leave somewhere that we've lived, that we've enjoyed, there will be a grieving process associated with that as well. Now, as we contemplate, as we age, will the setting work for me? Will it continue to serve me well? It's going to depend on our current needs and our future needs, as well as our desires and our wants, and certainly our financial ability to afford that particular space. So recognize what was fabulous at 40 as far as a residence, not so much at 90 sometimes. And I hear this story so often, particularly living in Denver. Individuals that moved to the Denver area when they were young and starting their families, and they built these fabulous homes in the foothills and up in the mountains, isolated from the rest of the world. And this was a great environment to raise kids and to enjoy life. But then as they were aging and they started to have some medical issues, and maybe they lost a little bit of strength and physical ability, maybe it was not a conducive environment to age well. So they had to transition back into town. Again, a huge loss for them. But you want to recognize this well before you have a medical emergency. You want to plan well for this so the transition is by your choice, not because you're forced to do so. So the adage, the real estate mantra of location, 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 it certainly comes to bear in this aging process. Because as I'm contemplating some of the limitations I have today that I've developed over the past few years, there's certain places that I would not enjoy as much because of those limitations. I recognize that. So I'm going to move and I'm going to plan for an environment that I can absolutely enjoy, that I can thrive, that I can create a life that I love. So when it comes to housing, the goal is this. You want the right size, the right location, the right price, and the right community. And this takes some forethought. Now, in order to age well in place, I'm sure you've heard this term before, aging in place. I stick in well because I don't want you to just grow old where you stand. I want you to age well in that particular environment. We have a lot of things to consider, and we have a lot of options and perhaps opportunities. But in order to avail ourselves of these options and opportunities, we need to see beyond this moment. We need to look beyond the here and now, because the environment in which you're currently living, it may serve you quite well today, but what about 10 or 20 years from now? Looking down the road, will that particular environment be conducive to aging well? Will it be a safe environment for you? So let's consider the situation, kind of the thought process that we can go through as we are trying to retire by design. First, let's consider the residence that you're currently residing in. So have that image in your mind, whether it's a single family dwelling, a condo, a townhouse, maybe you're currently in a long-term care community. So assess this realistically. So for example, let's say you've lived in the same house for the last 30 or 40 years. So you have aged 30 or 40 years, and so has your home. So in the years to come, are you looking at re-roofing, re-plumbing, rewiring, repainting, re-siding? And is that a good use of your time and your money? And do you even want to deal with that? So realistically assess it. Then also understand the configuration. Is it multi-level? Do you have to deal with stairs? On and on and on. So you assess your residence. Then honestly assess your current abilities and disabilities. Now, I recognize that most individuals, and when you look in the mirror, you feel 10 years younger than your chronological age. Research bears that out. But this is when you have to be honest. What are you capable of doing at this point in time? So assess that in the here and now, and then anticipate and plan for future changes. The process that we just talked about physically and cognitively. Consider the what ifs your physical ability changes in the future. Now, I witnessed this in real time when I first moved to Denver with my next door neighbors. They had not anticipated future physical changes, and that totally disrupted their retirement. When I moved into my home here, it was in 1996, I believe, 1994 maybe. I met my next door neighbors. They were in their mid 70s, and they shared with me that they had built their home. They had designed it. It was their dream house, and that was their last home. They had retired there. They were going to die there. And they were so proud of their house. They had this gorgeous garden in the backyard, and I absolutely loved them. Now, it was a multi-level home. And about 10 years after I moved here, I noticed they'd put a for sale sign in their front yard. And I couldn't believe it because I knew the story. So I went over, knocked on the door, and I said, "Hey, what is going on here?" Well, they shared the sad news that the woman, the wife, she had diabetes, and she had been suffering from severe neuropathy in her feet, and she could no longer manage the stairs. And that's where their bedrooms were, upstairs, as well as all the full bathrooms. And so they told me, they said, our dream just was destroyed. We can't live into our dream. Now, I share that story with you so that you will not be tripped up by the stairs, literally or figuratively. Because oftentimes we don't think that far down the road. We can't imagine not being able to ambulate up a flight of stairs if we've never had any kind of physical challenge before. But we need to consider the what ifs, the possibilities, such that we're not forced to move. We can have that plan in place. So proactively evaluate your options. Proactively evaluate your situation, and that will certainly serve you well in this design process. Now, as we're contemplating housing possibilities, what a lot of people will do is say, well, ultimately, I don't think I can stay in my current residence forever, but maybe I can kind of bridge the gap for a few months or maybe even a few years. So here are some proactive housing options you might want to consider. And these are not whiz bang things you've never thought of before, but just to kind of plant some seeds for you. Certainly home modifications. In fact, there are some businesses that specialize in remodeling homes for older adults, to transform stairs into ramps, to widen door frames to accommodate a wheelchair, to remodel a bathroom from a tub shower configuration to roll in to accommodate a walker or a wheelchair, changing knobs into levers, a variety of things that can make the home a bit safer, more comfortable, more accommodating. And again, if that buys you a few years, those are going to be lovely years. And then you can consider a transition. Individuals also, I think, need knowledge about the fact that, let's say you do have some medical concerns that arise. Well, you don't necessarily have to immediately transition to a higher level of care, a long-term care community. You can hire professionals to come into the home and community-based services, medical and non-medical care. Again, that can certainly afford you the opportunity to stay at home. We can leverage technology, all the different systems to make your home a little bit smarter, a little bit safer, a little bit more secure. Having monitoring services to make sure that you are safe and well in your home. There are personal care robots that are being spearheaded by the country of Japan. They are utilizing care bots extensively because that is the oldest country in the world today. They have a huge need for care for older adults, and they don't have enough people in the business. And so they are experimenting with a variety of different care bots to help with activities of daily living. We're starting to see the introduction of care bots into the United States, and maybe not in my lifetime, but certainly in the next 20, 30 years, this will probably be very common because it will be cost effective and hopefully very beneficial for the individual. Some individuals will want to stay in their current residence, and maybe they ask a family member to move in. This could be for a short rehabilitation from surgery, or it could be a long-term proposition as well. An older child that's willing to do that to help with an aging parent. Now, that's kind of the thought process to help you stay where you currently are. But if a move is required or it's desired, there are a myriad of opportunities and options to consider. And we're just going to touch on some of these, again, that you can explore to a greater depth after this conversation. 25% of older adults are known to move in with other family members, usually adult children. They have an extra bedroom, they have a basement, whatever it might be. Now, this oftentimes is because it's financially affordable, and sometimes it's the family or the cultural norm. We want you to move in with us. We want to care for you. Now, even if this is the preference of everyone involved, realize that boundaries, personal boundaries, need to be established shortly after that combination, that transition occurs. So discuss ground rules, roles, and responsibilities, because this will lead to healthy relationships. Family systems, a very tenuous balance, even on a good day. But when you introduce a new member into that home environment, everything is off balance for a while until you reestablish that equilibrium. So just know the waters may be a little bit choppy initially, but it doesn't mean that you won't have smooth sailing in the months and years to come. Another option, if you choose to relocate, certainly long-term care communities, all varieties, whether it's assisted living, skilled nursing, continuing care retirement communities, memory-specific care. Whatever option that you are considering, just make sure you understand the financial implications of all the things that you might be considering. Because the financial costs of care, this is a hot topic of discussion today and has been so for the last probably 15 or 20 years. The financial cost for long-term care communities, that cost can threaten to break the bank. And because we live in an age-denying society, oftentimes families haven't even considered the cost of care until a crisis occurs. And then they have a tremendous amount of sticker shock. Now, this isn't, again, just a small percentage of our population. 70% of persons over the age of 65 will need some form, some level of long-term care, whether it's transitioning to a community or hiring professionals to come in the home. So we need to be knowledgeable about what that financial commitment could be. This is where I want to highly recommend a great source of information. And this is through Genworth, an insurance company that's well known for their long-term care policies. But they have this wonderful resource on their website, the homepage. It's a little button and it has cost of care printed on it. You click it and it's a link to an internal website that posts the median cost of care nationally, by state, and also large metropolitan areas. And it gives you information on non-medical home care, assisted living, skilled nursing, and adult daycare. Now, this can give you an idea of what you're looking at as far as a future expense. It can also allow you to compare, okay, how does the cost of care in Denver compare maybe down in Florida, if you're thinking about relocating to a different part of the country. Now, just to give you an idea, as far as the median cost of care monthly, non-medical home care, that's 44 hours a week. Nationally, that's about $4,500 a month. And in Colorado, a little over $5,300 a month. So Colorado is higher, it's more expensive. Assisted living, this is for a private room, $4,300 nationally, about $4,600 in Colorado, again higher. Skilled nursing, a private room nationally is $8,800 a month. In Colorado, over $9,700 a month. And then adult daycare, 5 days a week, around $1,600, both nationally and also locally in the state of Colorado. So again, not trying to scare you around the cost of care, but to inform you so that you can sit down and discuss the financial implications of these various settings. And you can eliminate things that are beyond your financial ability. You can focus on the things that are viable options. And then you can start considering proactively your wants, your needs, and your financial wherewithal. Now, we also, when we're talking about the setting and where we are getting older, we need to also point out some community considerations as far as where you choose to get older. And that includes whether you like the metropolitan environment, or do you like to live in suburbia, or do you want to be in a more rural community? Well, all of those are going to have their pluses and minuses, but you're going to have a preference on where you want to be and where you want to get older, where you want to retire. You'll consider the seasons. Perhaps if you've lived in a cold environment for the last 30 or 40 years, you've had enough of the white stuff. You don't want to shovel snow anymore. You don't want to deal with cold. So you're dreaming of the sunny South, maybe a little bit of beach time. Well, check out the options. What's possible? Where might you choose to move? And in that environment, certainly access to healthcare is of primary importance as we get older. Now, I know the utilization of telemedicine, telehealth has soared over the last 2 years because of the COVID situation. But that's not the end all and be all. If you have an emergent situation, you want to have access to an acute care setting to be able to get quickly to a hospital environment, go into the ER and have that particular situation addressed. So you're going to have to plan for that well in advance in the selection of your geographic location. Also, where you're contemplating retiring, are home health services available? Well, in Denver, I could choose from probably hundreds of different providers, but I don't have to go too far to the west up in the foothills where it's beyond service, because the density of the population does not financially support that business model. So again, you want to check that out before you make that decision as far as your geographic location. The same goes for access to palliative care and hospice care at the end of life. Is this a service you can access where you are residing? And what about transportation options? As we get older, we may be less inclined to drive or maybe no longer able to drive. So is there public transportation that can take you to and from a doctor's appointment? Is there light rail, a bus system, Uber, Lyft? Can you afford to pay for those services? And what about access to retail services or bankers or grocery stores? Is it just down the road, or is it quite a haul for you to get there? And then also consider the neighborhood that you are considering retiring to. Is it safe? Is it a neighborhood in which you feel like you're a part of that community? Are you maybe the lone older adult and there are younger families around? I'm not saying that's bad, but is that the environment that you choose to age in? And what about the neighbors? Do you know them? Do you feel comfortable with them? Do you have relationships with your neighbors? Can you rely on them? All of those factors come together in determining whether the setting that you've chosen is going to allow you to age well and to retire well. Now, the good news about all the options related to housing is there are some really innovative and creative senior housing options out there. And a lot of that is because of my generation, the boomers. We were not satisfied with just a handful of options. We wanted a lot more than that. And so I'm just going to touch on a few things that I hope that you will investigate more intentionally if it kind of tickles your fancy, because some of these I think are very interesting, and certainly some that I'm taking into account in my own planning process. So for example, what about home sharing? Now, this is an interesting proposition because it's kind of like going back to the early 1900s and boarding houses, where you had someone that owned a home, had some extra bedrooms, and they rented them out. Well, today, that desire to live with other people, not to age alone, but to age in community, has birthed a business model. And you see 3 businesses listed on your screen: Silvernest, Roommates, and Sunshine Home Share. These organizations will help to pair up, to match up individuals that are looking for housemates, to match them up with people who are looking for a place to live. And so they do a level of vetting. They understand what you're looking for, and then they allow you to interview that person to see if it's going to be a good fit. You can also do this very informally. If you own a home and you're alone and you have some extra space, you may have a friend or a couple of friends, and you decide to combine households. Now, I actually did this in 2006, way before I knew anything about home sharing or shared housing. I just ran around with a really good friend of mine. We were like sisters, and we decided we could save some money. Instead of having 2 households, we combined into one. And as we've gotten older and weirder together, we are committed to care for each other. And we have 2 or 3 other friends that want to join in on the fun once they retire. And so ultimately, we will design a home that has 4 different master suites, a common area. And yes, we will continue to get older and weirder together and share in all the expenses associated with that. So something that you might want to consider or chat about with some of your friends and family. Co-housing is becoming much more common and popular. A property where you own individually your residence, typically built around a green belt, and there is a common house in which communal meals are served, and everyone in that community chips in to help cook from time to time. If you read anything about co-housing, you'll recognize that it's the communal meals that are believed to be the glue of that community, just like any other family or neighborhood. You come together to cook together, eat together, and then you sit down and you solve all the problems of the world around the dining room table. Now, these are scattered all over the country today. Some local examples here in Colorado. In Boulder, there is wild sage, there's silver sage, which is age restricted. You have to be of a particular age before you can live in it. There's a newer property in Denver called Aria. I believe that's intergenerational. And then there's Casa Verde Commons in Colorado Springs. Now, each one is going to have a little bit different flavor, a little bit different culture, and certainly a different price tag. Some of these co-housing communities can be incredibly expensive. So again, you need to do the due diligence, do this well before the need arises, and make sure that you're making the best decision for yourself and for your family, an informed decision. There are also niche communities where you have individuals that have a particular interest or maybe an ability that choose to come together and live together. Oftentimes artists, painters, singers, playwrights, novelists, whatever it might be. I've heard of some communities on the East Coast and the West Coast, and I think they are transitioning toward the center of the country as well. University-based retirement communities, many people are interested in these. An example is Dartmouth University. They have an affiliation with a long-term care community in which all the residents are afforded the possibility of taking classes and availing themselves of all the resources on campus. Now, I am a self-professed geek. I am a lifelong student, and I love this idea. I've always wanted to go back on campus. It's an environment that I find life-giving. So I'm hoping one day soon we will actually have this option in Colorado. To date, we don't. There are about 100 organizations that are considered this model throughout the country, but it's growing because there's a lot of interest in this. The interest in multi-generational living is soaring. In fact, it's to the point there are builders now that have multi-gen floor plans. Lennar Homes and the Toll Brothers are two builders that offer this opportunity for people that they are building homes for. And it's typically for 3 generations, and they design the home such that each generation has an area in which they have some autonomy and some privacy. But then there's a common area where they can come together and be together and care for each other. And multi-generational living, we saw a huge uptick after the Great Recession of 2008, when Gen Xers were boomeranging back into the basement of their boomer parents. And that trend has continued because out of necessity, people realized, hey, this isn't a bad design. This is actually working quite well for multi-generations to live together and care for each other. The village model is also another idea as you are getting older and aging in place. In your neighborhood, you can have an administrative oversight that will help to bring your community together, to schedule and manage volunteer activities to create that neighborhood feel, and also to negotiate a lower price point for contractors that come into that neighborhood to do services such as lawn care, AC maintenance, heater maintenance, things of that nature. In Denver, we have an organization called A Little Help, which is growing statewide. And in Colorado Springs, there is the Own an I Village model on the north side of town. This started probably 30 years ago in Boston in the Beacon Hill neighborhood. And it's a great way to create that sense of community and camaraderie and that give and take in a neighborhood that allows us to age well and to have that naturally occurring support system in our neighborhood. Now, if you've ever had the idea that you're going to downsize to the point as you get older that you're just going to get rid of everything and you're going to live in a tiny house, I would highly recommend that you test drive that idea to see if you're comfortable in that space. And I discovered a place in Lyons, Colorado. Interestingly enough, it's called We Casa. And most people actually will utilize this for a little short vacation. They go up into the foothills and they rent one of these. But again, you could do this for a weekend or a week to see if you get claustrophobic, or maybe you realize that this actually is a viable option. I think the big kicker for most tiny houses as we get older, the multi-level scenario and floor plan of most of these is not going to be conducive as we age. But I have another idea for you. It's called a Minka home. Now, this is the brainchild of Bill Thomas. He is a geriatric specialist, a physician, that is a champion for elders and aging in our country. He's phenomenal, has books, articles, all kinds of organizations out there. But he's developed this organization, myminka.com, in which these are designed to be one level, 6 to about 900 square feet, depending on whether you order a 1-bedroom or 2-bedroom. They are prefabricated homes. And he's working with a university in Indiana to refine the manufacturing process to bring the price point down. Started out at $200 a square foot. I think it's now down to $175. Universally designed to accommodate the aging process. You order it, it's delivered on a flatbed truck, you hire a contractor, and they put all the pieces together like a Lego set. He's also creating Minka communities that are intergenerational. Now, if you go to the website, you can go through a virtual tour. You can look at pictures of the Minka homes. I think it is just a phenomenal design. I'm very interested in exploring the viability of this in the future. So just another option for you to consider. So in summary, when you're talking about retire by design, when you're thinking about how am I going to age well and be well and enjoy my retirement, there's a lot to consider, but don't get overwhelmed. Just take a deep breath and take one step at a time. Have a little list. And as you go through the process, just keep checking things off. And as you have that non-fearful, non-anxious posture leaning into this process, you can get busy and you can start dreaming and you can start designing and truly believe that you can create a life that you love. So don't be boxed in by the pervasive societal cultural attitude of we don't want to go there, don't want to talk about getting older. Overcome that. Have your own perception of this journey of living longer, getting older, but still being able to enjoy this journey. Confront your fears about aging and retirement and embrace your hopes. Imagine, visualize, and ultimately live your dreams. Retire by design. Create a life you love. It's possible. Now, I always like to do a little heartfelt closing to give you one more thing to think about if I haven't babbled enough. And my concluding remark today is really my hope. And my hope is that you will contemplate and consider and actually accept the invitation to lean into this process. And by so doing, you will resonate with the belief of Joan Erickson, who noted that to grow old is a great privilege. That is what I hope to live into. That is what I hope you experience. Now, before we get to questions, just a few resources for your consideration. If you're interested in other programming that I'm doing, you can always go to my website, cardinallife.com, click on the events page. I have probably 35 programs scheduled between now and the end of the year. They're all free of charge. So if you're interested, you see a topic you like, send me an email and I will sign you up so I can get the appropriate link to you. If you're interested in caregiving or you have an interest in the topic, I wrote a book, Caregiving for the Genius, a few years ago, available at public libraries as well as Amazon. And if you enjoy podcasts, I have Cardinal Musings with Jane Barton. I hope you feel like I've invited you to a virtual kitchen table. And this is a place where we can address what matters most in life. And finally, I want to thank you for your time and attention today. I'm looking forward to your questions. Just know I'm wishing you many blessings on your journey. And if after this evening a question bubbles up, do not hesitate to drop me an email at cardinallife@msn.com. I would love to continue the conversation. So now it's time to look at the chat room, or if you want to unmute and ask your question verbally, just know that I would welcome that as well. I'm just going to stop sharing so I can go back to the Hollywood squares. So any questions that came up, Pamela?
You know, I have reviewed and I don't see any. There were some thank yous for your presentation, but I don't see any I don't see any other questions. Do you have a resource list for them? Because you don't have your PowerPoint available, right?
Right, but I sent the handout ahead of time and I thought it was posted with the registration link. But
Okay,
I'm not sure.
okay.
Jessica may know that.
Yeah, yeah.
If not, I can certainly send you that and then you can forward it to those who registered for the program.
Okay, we can do that, or we can post it on the link. Yeah, we can do both. Because I am not sure if it got there or not. I just want to make sure people have that if they're interested. Jessica just posted, I think she just posted where it's at on the chat.
Aha, I
Yeah,
see that. Okay, great. Thank you,
Yeah.
Jessica.
that's awesome.
Yeah, I always include a pretty lengthy bibliography, so it'll have
That's what I thought.
the
yeah.
websites, the quotes, all of that will be contained in the handout.
So
So
we
don't-
got, you got thank yous and great kudos here. Thank you for the extra push to look forward to what lies ahead. Thank you for the motivation.
Certainly my pleasure. And I'm happy to entertain any questions if people want to chime in.
There is a community in Colorado Springs that does the lifelong learning. And I'm trying to remember the name of it. Some of you who are listening may know the name of it. I forget, but it is a Pillar Institute of Lifelong Learning that we have here in Colorado Springs when you were talking about that.
Is that affiliated with the University of Colorado or is it totally separate?
It's totally separate, and they've been in business for several years. Vicki Hefner is the director, the executive director there. And they have a core of volunteers, and they're running strong. So
Yeah. I've actually served as an instructor for Ollie up here in Denver, and the membership, I think you have to be 55 to be a member, but I have to tell you, those are some of the most engaged, quote unquote, students in the room. I just thoroughly enjoyed the experience.
Yeah.
And I learned so much from everybody that attended the program. And at the time I did it, we were in person. And we'd usually have a class of 50 to sometimes 100 people. I mean, it was just extraordinary. I absolutely loved it.
Cool. Yeah. Thank you for the excellent insight. Very organized, thorough, and well done. Very inspirational.
Well, I hope so. I think we need to be inspired if we're going to retire and age well. So I'm doing my best.
I agree. Folks, there will be a survey, as mentioned earlier. In the presentation, there will be a survey that will be sent to you. If you want to go into the drawing, make sure you put your email address into that survey. And there will be a drawing, and I think she said it was a $50 Amazon card. And that will be coming your way. Probably it will come in tomorrow morning in your mailbox rather than this evening. But please give consideration to how you would like to see presentations in the future, other topics, critiques. We are looking to continually improve. Obviously, we're in our 7th year, so we're looking to make it as meaningful as possible. So, well, unless there are any other questions from anyone, or if someone wanted to share a story about a situation or an event relative to this presentation, that certainly would be open and welcome as well. Jane had shared a story, 1 or 2 stories in her presentation, and the stories are always meaningful. So if you would like to do that as well, please don't be shy. Okay. I think that's it. So with that, please join us next week. First of all, thank you, Jane. Thank you for your presentation. Really
My ple-
appreciate it.
My pleasure. Thanks for inviting me.
You bet. You bet. We look forward to continue partnering with you in the future. So
Me too.
yeah. And stay tuned then for the next 3 Mondays at 4 o'clock. We look forward to seeing you then. Bye for now.
Bye-bye.
Bye.